record. All right, and let me share my screen.
Hey guys.
Hey George. All right, let's get this thing rolling. It's just jumping off from another meeting, like stumbling through stuff here. All right, so welcome to the virtual brown bag. Things that we do every Thursday. As usual, go through an intro, give folks time to join in, as well as run through our normal intro. Privacy concerns, we always record these meetings. We always encourage folks to be sharing things, either words, thoughts, or their screens. So if you're sharing anything, just make sure you're not sharing anything that's going to cause you any kind of trouble or make us go back and edit the videos, because that adds a little bit of a burden on our end. What is the virtual brown bag? Is a place where we get together, we share tips and tricks, experiences, frustrations, or difficulties, usually related to software development, but also projects all together, and we go over a whole bunch of different topics. We do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype, at least for now, until we get something better sent our way. And we have shared a bunch of stuff through all sorts of things. Like we've talked about user stories. We talked about, how to effectively work remotely. We talked about TypeScript, C#, Racket, and whatever other languages, folks feel like talking about. So anything is really pretty much fair game, at least the things that have been brought up in the past. We have a virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting. Over there's a link to the Slack channel as well if you want to just continue certain conversations, to go more in depth into things that we didn't have time to go over during the call. You can just continue the conversation there, or you can start a conversation like suggesting topics for the next meetings. And you can also find the links, of course, to the previous videos. They're all posted over there as well. Other than that, let's roll. Anybody would like to kick us off and start sharing or asking questions, or whatever you're up to or you've been up to?
I have a quick thing I want to share.
Sure.
Because look at me.
So fancy.
So yeah, I got my private invite to Mmhmm, and this is like obviously so much better as a way to do video calls. And like, I could pull up my virtual brown bag pad and I could like point to stuff on it.
Right.
Or I could fly over to it and just talk about stuff really easily. Oh, I'm right there talking about stuff, and get larger. We could do over the shoulder, like that. Boom, up there. You could go transparent. Like I've been doing my project board reviews like this. Good. And it's awesome as I like point to cards. And I was like, oh, now I kind of see the next step that's going to happen. Someone needs to. You could do this via a browser plugin, but someone needs to like handle it, like implement a hand tracking plugin that plugs into Jira so I can pick cards up. like why the heck not? I want to be able to tap on a card virtually and have it like pop up instead of doing the little sidebar thing that they do. Right. But yeah, like this is awesome. This is like clearly a better way to do it. It took 5 minutes to figure out. Ooh, now I'm more visible, like because of my Force Ghost. And then yeah, it has a whole strip where you can like go through slide decks really easily, but then share your screen. And the way this works is actually really clever. Like this is one of the few instances, like in general in software, integration is a huge mess. This is an example of them doing right, because what they did was that when you run it, sets up a virtual camera driver. And then you have the Mmhmm app, which is right here, that you basically determine what streams to the virtual camera driver. So any app that lets you pick which camera which camera driver you're using is going to work with this just by default, which is like, so they don't need to write any Zoom specific, Meet specific, Skype specific plugins. There are bugs around it, but like it's pretty impressive, and it's integration done right. It's like thought through, done at the right level, and done really, really simply. So I'm really into this. And I congratulate them. In 1 year, they will be bought out by someone and make a ton of money. Because this is like, yeah, obviously, like all the platforms should be doing this. Like, this is so.
And what's that called?
This is Mmhmm, MMHMM. It's you go in there, you can request an invite, or I think I can invite people too, though I'm not sure that the waiting period is any different. I requested it like early last week and got access this weekend. It is Mac only right now though. But yeah.
So any idea on where the differences are between these two and OBS, for example?
Well, I mean, like, I don't think this is I guess you can do stuff like this with OBS, right? But this is just like a much simpler thing. And does OBS do the virtual camera driver trick?
That's what I'm using right now.
Okay, so it's giving you a virtual camera driver. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, like this is just like a very simple tool with like all the like little dials for everything that you need for doing a presentation easily. Like, damn it, it's the wrong hand. That part's still hard to get around because it's the opposite hand of everything.
Yeah.
Like this is actually my right hand, but it's on my left. I do wish it would like convert me. I need it. Like,
Yeah, you can start doing your own weather forecast now.
I know, right? I'm sure that's like a preset they have here too. I would be surprised if it wasn't. I mean, yeah. The weather is seventh dimension. Yeah. So cool stuff. I'm immediately, like, instantly a fan of this. Like, but yeah, that's my big thing I want to talk about.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I just wrote it down. I'll check it out too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know I've been seeing folks doing the same kind of work with OBS. I just haven't gone through
But yeah,
the motions of setting it up to do it that way.
Yeah. No, I mean this was super easy and very, very nice. And OBS is like the big thing that you could do just about anything with. But
right.
Now I just need to get a green screen.
Yeah, one thing that
green screen would be next. Oh. Yeah. The green screen would make my ears not cut out in this.
Yeah, I wonder. It would probably even look smoother, like when you're moving around, that we can, like see all the cuts around your arm. If you had like a green screen, if it's gonna
definitely
improve that.
But
right?
I mean, I can't because like I'm at home and my wife has ultimate control over how everything works.
So you may want to try what I'm doing here. I just hang one up at the top. So I put like little hooks, like small hooks on the ceiling. So whenever I have meetings that I want to run the background, I just hang up the the green screen. And
I'm not sure my wife would be fine with even that.
Really? Oh, come on.
I know. I do actually have a projector screen downstairs that I probably could use for it. But I don't know. Drilling into the ceiling will scare her.
No. Dude.
There are collapsible green screens that attach to the back of your chair.
Yes.
What? Okay.
Yeah. They fold and put away when you're not using them.
Very cool.
Yeah, and even like the hook size that I'm using, it's not like nothing that you drill. It's like a 3M thing. It's like this big with just a tape that you just snap up there.
All right.
And I can then simply pull it off. It's really not
foldable thing for a chair.
Yeah.
Nice. It's literally just a big green thing. Yeah, that's pretty slick. 40
Yeah.
bucks. I mean, yeah, that's kind of worth it. All right. All right. Cool. All right. I've got stuff I could talk about, but I don't want to. This was silly to hog too much time with this. I know, Seth. Last time you had stuff you wanted to ask about. And talk about.
I have something I can show off. I'm pretty tired, so I might be kind of incoherent, but I can show some stuff if you'll be a sympathetic audience.
No.
It's a cool way that basically we've designed this sort of skeleton service. I've been responsible for creating it at my company, and I kind of had about like 6 to 8 months to kind of iterate on it, and it's a sort of a TypeScript thing, but it's designed to solve some problems that I see in terms of, this is a really problem I've seen like at other companies as well, where basically your Swagger document is constantly kind of getting out of sync with the code. Like it's almost impossible, sort of even with super diligent developers, to like for the documentation to sort of be 100% correct without some kind of automated validation. I can share my screen. Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is one of the. So this is a very sort of. Let's see. This is a very basic. Let's see. Generate. I'll discard this. Discard this, and I'll show you the folder structure real quick. This is just like a basic kind of node to do application. It uses Postgres. The first thing the goal of this was basically to create something that wasn't super opinionated, so it was extendable, but to have certain conventions for that would basically be kind of powered up by TypeScript. So for example,
can you actually make your font size a little larger?
Oh yeah, sure. And this is an Express application. So one of the things that I did early was I was like, well, how do I ensure that someone, when they're defining a route in the Swagger, and the Swagger is here, how do I guarantee that that route then gets defined inside of this route definition file? So for example, like they don't end up having a sort of a creating like a new post method, and then not having that method in this definition file also defined in the Swagger. Basically, you can use properties of TypeScript the way that it can essentially import. It can read JSON files and do its kind of IntelliSense on that, basically treating it as a kind of as a constant. And using that in a little bit of like TypeScript map types, you're able to sort of guarantee that these routes themselves are in synchron with the route definition file. So essentially, there's a one-to-one.
So the Swagger, I haven't used Swagger. Swagger is just defined in JSON.
Yeah, and so if, for example, I have this hello endpoint here, and I'm actually defining this in YAML, and then I'm generating it as JSON because I just find YAML to be like an easier sort of thing to actually, it's just less verbose. So you've got this hello endpoint, you can see it's a get. And if I define, and if I change the method to a post, you can see I get a TypeScript error. Same if I do something like change the path, I also get a TypeScript error. And so the TypeScript error is reading this JSON file and
so it'll give people TypeScript errors unless they also update the Swagger document.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So show us how it works.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it infers the, grab this here. So again, you use this type of method to grab the Swagger paths, and you can see that the Swagger paths are now sort of now you can see that essentially you've turned your entire JSON file into a type, right? And so you've got this, and now you've got like all of the, you've got the, and every single key is a route, and their children are methods.
Wait, how does it know the properties of the JSON parameters? Because like type info, how does it know the type info of the JSON
Using
properties?
this type of keyword.
So like, I don't. Can you show that JSON file again? Like,
Yeah.
like how would it know something is a string and not an integer? Because that's
it infers it from the data type. So it infers the primitive.
Okay. So it wouldn't be. It would be able to tell it this is a string. It wouldn't. It'd be able to tell if no. Well, it actually has to be this exact string.
But the thing that we're not actually worried about, we're not thinking about these as but there's type information that we know for sure, right? And that's that there are these fields here. So those are kind of the important things, right? Like we're not thinking about these primitives over here. We're actually just thinking, we really just care about these fields over here.
Okay.
And so using the key of parameter, or the key of keyword, you can then, and the key of essentially just gets all the keys and turns them into a union. It's just a helper. You now have a list of all the paths as a union.
So yeah, can you hover over path again?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And then using this, then we're going to create this route definition generic that is going to this route definition generic, which is going to describe each one of these, right? So this kind of maps to that. And you're saying here that P extends path. So you're grabbing all of the paths, right? And you're saying that each one of these paths has to be, each one of these route definitions, each one of the generics has to be one of these paths. So the parameter has to be a path, which is again this field. And so that maps to this Swagger path, right? So it means that essentially each of these Swagger paths now have to be one of those paths. Does that make sense?
Each okay.
Because you're creating this generic, and you're saying that it's Swagger. You're saying it takes a type parameter of P, and that P has to be a path, and then that parameter is assigned to this.
So you could change that hello to do, but not to do too, right? Like line 17, you could change that.
Yes, exactly. If I did this, I would get an error, right? Because it's expecting one. It has to be one assignable to one of them. Right.
And then it has to be, and then the method has to be the method that corresponds to it.
Exactly. And now that we have the Swagger paths, we know that we have the keys of every single one of them. And so now we actually can get the actual methods on top of them. And so now that we have this method here, we can actually say, oh, if I change this to a delete, I'm going to get an error, right? Because this method has to exist in that Swagger route definition. And then the handler, of course, can be anything. Like this is not really typed. This is just for help, and then this similarly. And so using this kind of cute thing, and then so what it's doing is it's taking these all routes, and then what this is it's kind of a weird thing, but this is actually creates a union, which is this. So when you use this is a mapped type syntax. So like again, it's kind of like using the dot map, like using like a array dot map, or it's a very kind of, it's sort of a, it's they think it's an intuitive syntax. I think it's a little weird.
Yeah, it's definitely weird, but like so
right. So what this does without this is it actually creates a new object. This seems like a more intuitive, right? And so what it's doing is it's taking each path and turning it into an object that looks like this.
Right, which makes sense.
But then when you add this special syntax, this is actually like an indexed, like a discriminated union syntax. And so this actually ends up creating a union. It doesn't create like, right. And so all routes is now actually a union of route definition. Right. And so what you're saying now is that this array, this array, this is an array of a union of route definition.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Though the handler, like ideally you would be able to map properties to your handlers and stuff too, and that part isn't going to work. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so you're like, this is a cool feature, right? But of course, there are still things that can go wrong, right? Like one example is like the request handler generic, which is a super long generic. Well, like you're sort of forced to kind of fill it out manually, right? Because you want to. And what this generic does is it basically ensures that the results match the results in this res.send are those that are basically created when you create this generic. I guess I'll give you an example. Like if I created this if I tried to do res.send 1, 2, 3, I'd get a TypeScript error because the first generic property is the second generic property is Boolean.
And what does that
and
mean?
You can see that that's right.
Okay. So wait, the second generic property is the what the res.send accepts? Is that it? Or
this is okay. So
what's the second generic? By the way, generic parameter, not generic property.
Oh, sorry, generic parameter. Yes. Yeah. So this is forget this foo. So this is kind of a little funny. I'm actually like sending the foo as a thing, but yeah. So if I was to change this to a string, and this is ugly to me because this is a very verbose and kind of an error-prone way of typing your handler, and all of that information should exist on the Swagger document, right? And so enter this. There was this awesome library. There's this cool library that. This cool library that this guy Horiachi created called DTS generator, and it's unique in that it actually is designed to generate generate types from your Swagger. And Swagger is a weird format because it's actually called OpenAPI, and there's a lot of drama in the OpenAPI world, but basically OpenAPI 3.1 came out, and it's basically like 90% compliant with JSON schema, but not 100%, which meant that like there were certain tooling. There's like a lot of JSON schema parsers that will reject OpenAPI, even though all of this looks like a JSON schema, right? Like, and that's something that's like. And so what DTS generator did was it was like the first one to come out that actually like was able to handle both like regular JSON schema and like OpenAPI, but it's really, and so I'll show you the types that it generates. So essentially what you run is, and I have it as a pre-commit, as a post-commit hook, but I also have this codegen thing, and you run, and it's just a script that does npm run codegen, and it basically uses DTS generator to generate all of these types. And they're pretty good, but there's still some issue, and they work well. So now, for example, in this situation, what I can do is I can like go to components, and then I can do, I think components dot, just typing this from scratch is kind of annoying. You'd be like, the first one is param, so I do components dot, no, it actually be, sorry, paths is the right one. And I guess the annoying part is kind of the point I'm trying to make here. So dot get dot parameters dot foo, So you have and you have to just go through and do this. Now with our second argument, it's the response body. So it's like path2.d. And this is cool because like it guarantees, so now that you have something like this set up, you end up guaranteeing that your request handler like will generate code that always matches the JSON schema. So you can never end up accidentally like making a response that isn't defined inside of your Swagger. And that's all right. Like, but one of the things I did for like a company hackathon was set up a extra code generation step using this file that uses the TypeScript uses the TypeScript compiler API to kind of walk the tree and actually generate request handlers directly from DTSGen. And so now what I'm able to do is, and I'll show you this example here. So now what it does is it generates these types, but it also generates the actual generated handlers here as generics. And you can see in this situation, you've got the responses are actually a union, because you can either do a res.send that's it can either be a 200 or a 400 or a 404. Like all of the responses that you've defined inside of your Swagger end up as a union as the possible responses that you can have. So like in to get and I'm gonna just delete. I'm gonna revert this part, and I'll revert this part. So here's an example of how like TypeScript kind of is super cool, because, or at least setting it up like this is cool, because not only like does it kind of give you guidance, but it like tells you where you need to fix things, right? And all of that can flow like directly from the Swagger that you've defined. So like I have this create to do component here, and I want to change like the schema from to do to something else, like to let's say some category, right? So before it was category. Run CodeGen. And you can see in generated, it's to do create to do post request body create to do, and here's the to do thing. What is it? Oh, create to do sends an ID. This is kind of a little bit hard to navigate. Yeah, so actually eventually like the interface is this to do interface, right? So I'm now going to change it to I'm going to just change the property name to like a category. And you can see it's now changed. But what happened was it now is actually, it does a TSC check, and now it actually shows me where I need to change this. And now that I'm mapping it, I'm like, oh, okay, so these are exactly the places that I need to change this or to update my fields. And because I'm using this request handler thing, like this, this new generated handler, this new generated express handler, I don't have any additional work in terms of, it's just a simple matter of importing new handlers as I create them in my Swagger, and everything automatically gets updated. The additional benefit is you don't have to do like when you want to add a new response type, because that response type shows up as like a union here. Like if I added a new response type, like for example, a 500 error, it would show up in this on this union automatically. Unfortunately, it wouldn't like make sure that it's exhaustive, meaning like I could still fail to return it. I don't think there's a way to actually guarantee that a handler has to handle all of the different cases, but that's it. Okay, so that's my presentation. I think I might have lost some people, but it's kind of a hard thing to explain, I think.
No, it makes total sense. I've been dealing with this nightmare for like the last 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, I just like that's not like an issue I ever ran into where like the documentation was getting the generated documentation was getting out of
Oh, I mean, if you don't generate documentation, I guess, like you want to make sure that your documentation is actually consistent with the code. And there's so many ways to do it. Like Fast API is like a Python library. Like a lot of, I would say, like a lot of these, like not Objection.js. What's the other like big TypeScript library? TypeORM. Like there's so much that exists that seems to be like either it's like weird comment like annotations that you write in your comment, like you annotate every like magical annotations on all of your routes to make sure that like those get turned into Swagger. Like there's a lot of different ways that places do it, but if like JavaScript, at least Node, has been kind of the Wild West, and so there's been a lot of people, I think, just maintaining their Swagger documentation by hand, and then like making sure either right like yeah.
What?
Okay. Seth, you got kids running around?
No, is that Isaac?
Oh no, it's not on my end.
Oh, do not have kids.
Yeah.
Mommy?
All right. Well, okay then. So okay, yeah. I like I said, I just haven't had that issue. I've also, I don't think I've ever worked on a publicly accessible API. So every API I've actually worked on has been like we knew who was accessing it. It was pretty straightforward.
So this is so the way that this is super helpful. In addition, is that this step can run as part of CI/CD. And so if you're in a situation with a lot of different microservices, you can actually use this to generate all of your clients, right? And then all of those clients are the clients that you use in all your other services to access a specific microservice. So for example, like I would have a CI/CD step where like when I merged this service into master, it would publish that service as like an NPM package, like a private NPM package. And then that package would be also something that could be updated in any other service that's consuming this service. So for example, like I have an order service that's consuming like a payment service. And so I want to get the payment service types, and I want to make sure that if the API changes, I'm not calling this service in the wrong way, right?
Right.
And so if you have this as this kind of documentation-driven design, basically you end up where like this changes, and then it kind of this change propagates down the service tree, and so the next time I run an npm update in my order service, I get a TypeScript error saying I'm calling the payment service client the wrong way. And this to me is a great, like, especially if you've got a lot of different teams working on different services, this is a great way to, like, I would think, I mean, obviously you'd like to give people a heads up, but to ensure that like information about breaking changes is communicated on like a code level.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. I get that. Like I understand how that is a solution. It's just it's interesting that it's not the sort of problem I've had to deal with.
I would say, have you worked in like a big like microservice? I feel like
I have, but it was not a thing that had launched
yeah.
at the time I was there. And then also like again it was going to be consumed. Like I knew all the people that were going to be consuming it. Like it was not big.
Yeah, I would not say that this solution is for everyone. I mean, like, certainly there's a number of microservices, and then the other thing is like it's very TypeScript specific. So
Yeah.
you kind of get this force multiplier when you're in like 100% like TypeScript environment. But it's like if it's Python clients that are consuming it, well, like they don't really get the benefit, right? So,
Yeah. I get that.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. One of the things that I did lately was just write a better a wrapper for Express that's not as annoying. Like you know, have it be able to support async functions out of the box, for example.
That's funny.
And so you can like
async function. Wait, sync functions?
Async functions. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like
it doesn't support async functions?
Well, so when you take a callback, so and by supporting an async function, what I really want is like to be able to do my stuff and then return the value that I want to return from. And you can't do that because you have to end the request by not by returning by response.write or response.send or whatever. So I mean,
but you can make but that function can be an async function. Like
that function can be an async function, right. But you can't just return the thing that you want to return. You have to manually control the flow. So yeah, I mean by async function, not just the fact that it is async. I mean by the fact that it works the way you would expect an async.
Gotcha. So the handlers themselves are like composable. I like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So which is like an easy thing. It's like a few lines of code, basically. Sure, I can show it. Whatever.
You need to kind of invent a specific API where because you're also returning like the status code, I assume, and you also
yeah. Okay. So it was this much code, and I mean that's mostly because like I added some like error handling and stuff like that to it. But yeah, basically, so you pass. I have the better Express wrapper. Here. This.
George, hold on. Does George's screen look very fuzzy to everybody?
It does. I thought that maybe I'm not tiled correctly.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, because like your video camera looks like crispy clean, George, but the screen share is like very blurry.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So first of all, it's in hand. Make it larger.
Yeah, that is weird. Is it
blurry?
Because
it must be? Yeah.
Is it I think it's because your face. Do you have a setting where your head is like on top of the screen?
Yeah, but that's
like
that is odd.
It's creating like a green screen behind you.
It must be sampling it in my screen share. It must be sampling my screen in order to do that. That's okay. Oh wait, I can't switch over to this because I'm sharing this out of the in-browser Skype. So
that's maybe that's why like is
browser. No, it might just be thing in general. So, but just make it. It still looks like crap, doesn't it?
It's like I can't look at. Oh, if you make it way bigger, now I can read it, but it looks.
Yeah, but it still looks stupid though.
I get I can read it from pairs. I can make out parts of it.
Yeah, like okay. Basically, what are we doing? So you go through and like you pass in the actual Express app, and basically. For what is this part actually? I forgot. For each one of these, you are okay. So Yeah, you're creating an object, right? With get, post, put, delete. Actually, well, and oh, right. So it basically, so you know how Express has get, post, put, delete functions. So it creates an object with its own version of get, put, post, delete functions, which in themselves are just kind of wrapping. This is the key part. So when you do better express.get, better express.post, it's the same thing as doing express.post or express.get, but wrapping things up in this request handler function.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And then that request handler function basically is this guy. So so it basically takes the callback right here. I guess I can point since I might as well be doing this. So it takes this callback this callback right over here, and then it basically starts an async, and it returns a new async function, like I said. But this is the one that takes the request and response. So that one's actually hidden. And now we're going to actually await that callback. We're going to pass in the request and response when everything's invoked. Great. And then we just check if the headers. So you can still do all the same stuff from inside of that handler as before. Like you would send the headers and stuff like that. We just check afterwards if the headers were already sent. If the headers were already sent, then whatever, we're done. We don't need to do anything. But if the headers weren't sent, then we're going to set a status code if a specific one was not returned. So this is what you were referring to. It's this structure, response status code. Like you could return that. You can return a structure with response status code as a property and response body as a property. And if you don't, it's going to send back 200 and whatever the response actually was, right? So it kind of works like if you just return something, it will work. It'll just return to 200. If you but if you want more control, you return this like more structured object.
Is there any weirdness around like middleware?
No, why would there be? Because this actually like this,
if I call a next,
that's fine. Because this is actually because remember the level this works at is on the level of just like wrapping that handler. So as far as Express cares, what's passed to it is just a regular request handler. Like all this transformation happens either before Express.
Actually, you're not actually calling it with next. You probably want to add that argument. So it doesn't.
Oh, you mean I get you mean. Well, but this is specifically for a callback handler.
Oh, but I'm just saying like
a callback handler never has next. Really. That's at the bottom of the chain.
There's stuff in the middleware chain like that could happen before
but this isn't middleware, right? This is actually well, I mean it's the bottom of the stack, like where actually the request and response is handled. I don't see why a middleware would ever be a problem for this, right? Because this only happens once when you actually get to the part where you're handling the request and response. And if there was middleware anywhere above it, it just would either pass it to here or not pass it to here. Like I do have some custom middleware, like this one down here, this log routes thing. Like that's some custom middleware that's just doing logging, and that's I don't know what adding next to here would actually do. It doesn't seem like
well, like if you never called next inside of your request handler, meaning like there was never right.
Yeah. Do you ever call right? But when you write app, express app dot get whatever, you don't call next inside of that callback.
If you write what express app dot next.
Right. So if you're doing something like express app dot net dot get clue respond request,
I mean you do and essentially it's a convention, maybe you're not, but you can't you do some people do, because often the next will be the thing that's at the end of the middleware chain, right? So it'll be like an error handler or something like that. So
Really?
yes, and so that's why that actually supports. That's why next is a possible argument there.
So
Like if
you're saying you would recommend doing something like that?
I don't recommend it. I don't like it, but that's like a common kind of convention, which is why they add next, is like basically because what people will do is add basically customize the bottom error handler. So instead of, if they have a specific like custom error message or format, you can call next with maybe the status code and the message, and it'll give, rather than using res.send status, like that's a kind of a common convention. I don't use it personally because it's not very not TypeScript friendly, but that's just like a thing. But if your point is to not, if your point is to make all of this,
I could put that in here pretty easily, and it would just give everything the ability to do it. I don't really see why you would do that. Yeah.
There wouldn't be any reason why, unless you were going to do it inside of this request handler wrapper, because because your whole point is you want everything to work as return values, and next is very much like the callback. A callback.
I wanted to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So I just want there to be another way, like a way to supply a status code if I need it.
Right. So what you could do in this is, like, instead of doing like res.status error response code, you could put that logic in like another piece of and then use next there. Like that would be but
this just does that, but
I don't personally, I'm kind of, the more I see next, the more I'm like, I've never seen, like, I've tried to use it in a clever way, and I've always found it adds an unnecessary level of indirection for error stuff, so I try to avoid using it.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is honestly fine, and it's like,
there is you can chain res.status and res.send together.
You could chain res.status.
Response.status.send. I'm just letting you know.
Wait, response.status.send?
Yes.
So you could. Yeah. Oh, we can do this. I would do that. Yeah, I can do that. All right. And look, they take some more lines of code. Stupid pretty world.
Dude, yeah, I agree. That is cool.
I mean, like, it's easy to do. I'm like surprised people don't do it more. I've done it on like several projects at this point. But like, yeah, that's the way you do it.
I feel like I would want it to be a node package or something. Like, I don't know.
People should just write their own.
I know, but it's just like, well, my issue with this is just like, if this is like a microservice, if there's like 20 microservices, this is like a piece that you'd want in some kind of common utils library.
But like, I don't know about like people out there in the world like putting it out there as open source beyond that, because just like use your own project convention rather than the stuff I made up. I'm fine with imposing this on the organization I'm writing it for.
Well, yeah, this is very opinionated, or at least it has certain opinions on it.
Right.
So
No.
but I'm just saying this is the kind of thing where like I would want it to be in like at least my company's library.
Right. Yeah, you would do that. I also found out this guy right here, Lodash-FP. So I didn't even know about that, but
Lodash-FP is like, dude, you're way behind. That shit is deprecated, bro.
Is it?
You need to be using it's like an abandoned project.
Is it?
Ramda. Use Ramda.
But Ramda is like very different though. Like,
it's not that different though. It's like this. I mean, it's really very similar. It's Lodash-FP is auto curried. Like same thing with Ramda.
Yeah,
and
I'm not even like
library is very and not like it's quite similar in terms of like.
It's not really the currying that I really care about that much. So I guess it'll be nice. I have not had an opportunity to need that yet. It's just the fact that it doesn't mutate, which I guess Lodash doesn't typically either. So fair enough.
Yeah.
But I'd probably just go back to using regular Lodash. I mean, really, the stuff that I need from there is stuff like from pairs, which stupid Node doesn't implement.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
aren't they going to? Isn't that like a
I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Freaking need done that. Yeah, I tried to switch to Node modules since we're on Node 12. I'm like, I can use native modules.
They're experimental at 12. You need to like switch to 16.
Well, whatever. I tried it on the latest one that's not experimental for, and nope is the answer because half the shit in your dependency chain does not use.
Yeah,
Node
it does not support
modules.
node modules. Yeah.
It's fucking stupid.
It's stupid. There is a solution. Like, have you seen that? What's it called?
ESM.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
but yeah,
working with someone who's the maintainer of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but ESM was the entire thing that I don't want to use.
Yeah, I know.
But
It's
then I have to, like,
not going to be solved
Yeah.
soon, but it
sucks.
I know it sucks.
Like
one of the things I like about TypeScript is it's like the easiest for me configuring like all of out of having used all of the other JavaScript tooling forever. Like TypeScript is the easiest to configure when it comes to like just it compiling ES6 modules. It has very good defaults. It's just like the idea of bringing in like I've hated the idea of bringing in Babel, and it's constantly like and then or setting up even worse like Babel register, so it's like this weird in-memory compilation of Babel, but you're not supposed to use it in production, so you have to it's like
yeah. I think like the problem with like using other stuff, even to some degree, TypeScript though is like TypeScript. This problem with them is that you're TypeScripting everywhere. Good luck. But like I can't choose to if I choose to write my tests not in TypeScript, then I don't
do that. That's terrible.
I don't know why.
Well,
besides that means like you need everyone to be like really on point with their TypeScript. Or you need to be sitting on top. You need someone to be sitting on top of like.
Well, just like
TypeScript definitions. It's a lot of overhead.
It's really nice to write in TypeScript because you're calling functions, and then you get all of the benefits of TypeScript.
I get that. Well, but so first of all, you don't get a lot of the benefits unless someone takes the effort to really set up typing information.
Oh yeah, I mean that's true for.
Which means you need someone who's mostly dedicated to process within the application, to process improvement, and like that's realistically a full-time job at that point. That's what you're doing most of the time.
I mean, I don't know if it depends on the I mean, if you're arguing that you need a platform team for your company, I'd say yes. But if we're talking about like a one-off project of like 5 people, I don't think so. I worked on like when I started with TypeScript, it was people in my company who had never used TypeScript before, and us kind of figuring out together. And like I took the lead on it because I was like the most interested in it in terms of like setting it up. But I didn't like people ended up learning. It was obviously when you
How long did it take to learn though? How long did it take?
I mean, I would say people 3 months in, like people prefer
3 months is when projects are over already, man.
I know. I mean, yes, it's true. Like if it's a short-lived project, not worth it in my opinion. But
yeah, like that's what a lot of my stuff right now is. Like it's like 3-month-long projects with 2 junior developers, and I'm on it, but I'm on it like 10 to 20 hours a week, maybe.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, for that
situation,
yeah, I wouldn't try to use TypeScript.
But here's the thing. That's the situation that JavaScript was meant for. Why the hell is it so difficult?
Well, I mean, because complicated code is being written in JavaScript in a way that it wasn't. Code that's meant to like live a long time. And so I just found like when I go back to older projects, like when I had to like go back to like we have a mixed code base, like we have a lot of JavaScript projects and a lot of TypeScript projects, and I find that like when I enter a TypeScript project, that like it's much easier for me to like onboard. Like I can start writing code, especially not worried. Like the compiler will catch the most of the errors, so I'm not as terrified or petrified of like writing code in an environment that like doesn't have super great test coverage, or that I'm kind of unfamiliar with. I can spend more time in the editor versus like making sure that I didn't break anything if I'm like building a web app. Like so I spend less time refreshing the page because so for me,
but hold on, but
like
wouldn't you also, especially given that you're all talking within an organization, you would also be complaining, because it's not the difference isn't just that the project is TypeScript versus the type of versus JavaScript. That's also the people writing it were the type of people who were willing to who were going to put in the effort into, implementing that extra level organization that TypeScript does, which they probably, even if it wasn't TypeScript, they probably would have done more with organization and stuff like that anyway, right?
Yeah,
so
it's like it's kind of a self-selecting group, right? Yeah. I would argue that though, that like even though you've got people who are dedicated, it doesn't necessarily mean that like the onboarding, like even you're like, okay, this is organized code, but you're still gonna find a lot of complexity, right? Mm-hmm. Like even if people are like dedicated to like creating nice abstractions, mm-hmm. and at least like I entered a project where it's like somewhat like the developers, I'm like, okay, they're like reasonably experienced, like mid-level developers, but like they were not like they wrote a React app, but like didn't do things to define the state or to like create like foreign basically API boundaries. Like, so it was like the entire state of the app existed at runtime. And so I was constantly like, I was having to do things like dump the entire state, compare it with the app to figure out like, okay, what fields are we actually using? Like all of this stuff. And if it was a TypeScript project, I think these people would have at least been forced to do more of that kind of defining. And it would have made at least my onboarding experience like a lot easier in terms of like, oh, this is like what this is what's actually getting, this is what the state is actually going to look like. Like, this is what the API is actually sending. This is what we're actually like, rather than these sort of like objects that were like whose properties are sort of that you have to kind of infer just by reading the code and reading how they're used. And so I'm not saying that like,
I get that. I mean, that's also what they were trying to do with prop types, but it was a pain in the ass that wasn't
right. And I mean, prop types are, to me, in my opinion, were bad because they actually discourage people who use prop types. Are like, well, TypeScript's just like prop types. And it's like, no, prop types are so shitty. Like, whenever I see prop types, I'm just like, oh, wow. So you can't do any like smart inference on them, really? Like, nope. You can't generate them like easily. You can't guarantee without ESLint that your like prop types are going to be like actually in sync. You can't guarantee, like, there's no, like, to me, and
well, hold on, that's not fair. You can't guarantee without ESLint, but if you only use TypeScript, like, which is even more than ESLint.
Oh, but like you need this well, you need a special, I'm not even saying that, you need a special ESLint like prop types plugin to say like, this is it. And then if the prop types are defined in a different way, meaning they're shared, that ESLint breaks. So if I'm importing prop types from another file and then ESLint like isn't smart enough to figure that out, that they're out of sync. So many things. Oh yeah, and then they also just like are based on runtime. So people have to, so every time there's a prop type has been broken, it's always like, oh, someone finds out 3 weeks later. Because someone bothered to look in the JavaScript console. And it's like, No, I mean, that's right. I mean, prop types were bad and were annoying. They were annoying, and I think they like they honestly hurt the argument for we should introduce TypeScript to React developers, because they're like, we've used prop types and we're not that into them. And it's like, no, dude, this is so much nicer. And also just like, so.
Since you're doing a lot of stuff with a TypeScript type system, have you like Have you been looking at other languages with advanced type systems?
I mean, yeah, like what's cool is that like TypeScript is really powerful, like in a way that like you even notice that other language. So now I've been looking at Haskell like kind of passively. I feel like everyone has, and and there's stuff that you can do in TypeScript that you just can't do in Haskell, which is like really cool. Like, oh, these people like actually allowed for a lot more like cool inference and stuff that you can do, like basically using like map types. Like that's not a thing that exists in Haskell, right? Like being able to do like direct inference from JSON, like not a thing that you can do in Haskell. Like,
all right, guys, it's been in the hour.
okay.
Oh.
I got to jump on to my next meeting. No, that was a good discussion about TypeScript
Yeah.
cheerleading and so on. All right, thanks a lot, Seth. Thank you for sharing. That was cool. That was
Thanks
really
for
good.
listening. And thanks everyone else for just listening to us
All right.
rant.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, man.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. See you
Bye.
all next week.